Her son didn't send a card, not for her birthday, not for 6 years straight. Elaine Roper, retired bookkeeper and widow, didn't shift her posture. Instead, she filed a motion that stripped him of every financial control he thought was his by default. By Thursday, his business accounts were frozen, his brand collapsing in silence. She'd been his silent investor once. Now, she was the ledger's final voice. And when the lawyers called asking why, her paperwork answered clearly. He never said thank you. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Elaine Roper sat at the edge of the worn dining chair she'd owned since the 90s, its cushion a bit sunken but still comfortable. Her hands rested politely in her lap, fingers stiff from decades of bookkeeping, but still elegant in their precision. The late afternoon sun bled through the vertical blinds, cutting amber stripes across the dining table, where a single gift sat waiting in a nest of unnecessary tissue paper. It was a pale, blush-colored designer box, the kind that usually held overpriced candles or minimalist vases. Nothing inside it rattled when she gently lifted the lid. It was empty. From across the table, Callie grinned like she'd nailed a punchline. "It's the aesthetic that matters these days," she chirped, brushing her highlighted hair back with perfectly manicured fingers. "It's about the experience, not the stuff." Elaine's eyes lingered on the box for a beat longer. She didn't flinch, just replaced the lid carefully, like it might still break. "Looks expensive," she said softly, setting it aside. Max, 17 and barely looking up from his phone, offered a casual, "Nice box, though." He meant it kindly, in the way teenagers often did, distracted, but not malicious. Jordan, her son, didn't say anything at all. He'd spent most of lunch talking about his new scale-up strategy, something about pre-seed venture dilution and international licensing. He hadn't asked once how Elaine was doing, not even when she'd brought out the lemon bars he used to love as a kid. Now, he was leaning back, smug in his tailored button-down, sipping an iced matcha Callie had brought in from some Scottsdale cafe. He glanced at the box, then at his mother, and smiled like a CEO who delivered on a marketing promise. Elaine gathered the plates without a word. The clink of forks and dishes into the sink was the only sound for a while, except for Callie scrolling and Max tapping out a text. No one offered to help. No one noticed that her hands trembled just slightly when she rinsed the glasses. Later that night, after they left, not with hugs but with hurried waves and shallow promises to do this again soon, Elaine sat at the kitchen table again. The designer box still sat in the center, smug and pristine. She turned it slowly in her hands, then dropped it into the trash with a thud that echoed louder than it should have. Cheryl arrived 15 minutes later with a bottle of her favorite boxed Pinot and a pint of Rocky Road. "You knew they wouldn't bring anything," Cheryl said, kicking off her sandals and settling in. "But an empty box? That's new." Elaine didn't answer right away. She peeled back the foil on the ice cream and handed Cheryl a spoon. "That's 6 years," Elaine finally said. "No card, no thought, no thank you. Not even a dumb candle from a gas station." Cheryl raised her eyebrows. "You keep count?" "I'm an accountant. Of course I do." They sat in silence a moment, the hum of the old fridge filling the space where sentiment might have gone. The desert wind pushed lightly against the kitchen window. Elaine's fingers curled around the spoon like a pen. "I used to give him savings bonds," she said softly. "When he was Max's age, I used to put $20 in his coat pocket every December and pretend not to know when he found it." Cheryl took a slow bite, then leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "Then maybe," she said, "it's time we look at their aesthetic on paper." Elaine looked up. Her eyes didn't water. They sharpened. She didn't speak. Not yet, but her jaw set just slightly, the same way it did when she found a balance sheet off by a dime. Outside, a car horn blared down the street. Elaine stood, opened the drawer by the fridge, and pulled out a plain manila folder. The label was handwritten, "Jordan, 1099/equity. She didn't open it. Not yet. Just set it on the table between them. Elaine set the folder aside for now, not out of hesitation, but strategy. Some truths need to steep. At dawn, she moved through the house with practiced silence, pouring herself a cup of coffee and opening her home office door. The familiar scent of old paper and lemon oil cleaner greeted her. It was the smallest room in the house, once a nursery, now lined wall to wall with locked cabinets and shelves of past lives filed away. She unlocked the bottom drawer of the center cabinet, then knelt slowly, knees popping, and slid out a dusty accordion binder labeled Investments, Silent, MISC. She didn't need to flip far. JR Concepts, LLC, Stakeholder Agreement, Elaine M. Roper, 10% ownership, silent, non-operational. Her signature was still crisp in blue ink, dated 7 years ago. Witnessed, notarized. She'd written the check herself. Jordan had asked her for a little seed money to get things off the ground. He promised she'd get it back, before year 3. No dividend had ever come, and she'd never pushed, until now. She picked up her reading glasses and turned to her laptop. It was an old model, but fast where it counted. Elaine opened her browser, typed in the firm's internal portal, and clicked Access Accounts. The login still worked. Jordan hadn't revoked her clearance. His company's financial dashboard popped up like it was waiting for her. Under distribution settings, her name still sat quietly next to her 10%. Elaine M. Roper, passive investor, access view only. She clicked quarterly reports. The numbers weren't flashy, but the spending was. Brand partnerships, creative development, consulting services. And under vendor disbursements, $4,250 to a company named Maven Blue Strategies, billed monthly. Elaine frowned. She knew how to spot shell companies. Half her life had been spent parsing through disguised overhead. From the kitchen came the familiar tap-tap of Cheryl's walking shoes. A moment later, she appeared in the doorway, holding a cinnamon bagel like it was evidence. "You started without me?" Elaine angled the screen toward her. "Take a look at Q3 expenses." Cheryl set the bagel down untouched. Her eyes scanned the columns like a bloodhound with a calculator. "Christ," she muttered, "they're writing off private travel as client development? And this one? Conference expenses? That's the week they were in Maui. Callie posted the whole thing." Elaine opened a second tab. She hadn't wanted to, but she needed the context. Callie's blog, Grit and Grace, Building Wealth Authentically. She clicked the latest post. "We built everything ourselves. No handouts, no shortcuts, just long nights, vision boards, and hustle. Family didn't always believe in us, but we believed in each other." Elaine didn't blink, just quietly highlighted the phrase, "no handouts" with her mouse and hit print screen. "Should we screenshot the part where she photoshopped Max into that fake private jet ad?" Cheryl asked dryly. Elaine didn't answer. She was already exporting a copy of the most recent financial statement. Print, then another. She stacked them with care. By mid-morning, the folder labeled Jordan. 1099's/equity was joined by another. Q1 through Q4 discrepancies/vendor audit trail. Elaine's printer clicked and whirred with surgical rhythm. Cheryl, still chewing, opened the file drawer without asking and began pulling IRS forms from the year Elaine had first invested. "Want Rita on this?" Elaine hesitated. Rita Solis had been her partner for almost 2 decades. They started their bookkeeping firm in a dusty strip mall near Chandler High. Rita didn't flinch easily, but she didn't meddle either. "She'll want it clean," Elaine said. "No loose ends." "Then give her the bones. She'll build the body." Elaine walked over to the landline and dialed Rita's number from memory. A voice answered on the second ring. "Solis Financial." "It's Elaine. I need a second set of eyes. Quietly." A pause. Then Rita's voice, level and cool as always. "You bringing me a mess or a motive?" Elaine looked down at the printouts scattered across her desk like puzzle pieces she already knew how to solve. "Both," she said. The smell of toner still clung to the air when Elaine poured herself a second cup of coffee. No cream, no sugar, just hot and honest. Her desk now looked like an evidence board in a crime procedural, bank statements clipped to itemized charts, color-coded flags marking the edge of every page that didn't sit right with her gut. She clicked back into the portal. Vendor, Maven Blue Strategies, $4,250 per month. Active. She ran a basic Secretary of State search. Nothing in Arizona, nothing in Nevada, not in Delaware either, no registered business, no LLC, not even a ghost site. Just nothing. The vendor didn't exist. Elaine leaned back, a slow breath leaving her lungs. She didn't sigh. She never sighed. It was just data, and data had structure, unlike whatever house of cards Jordan had built on this mess. Her phone vibrated with a soft buzz. Rita Solis. Text message. I've seen enough. Want me to call in Tom? Elaine tapped out a reply. Quietly. Same deal as last time. Tom Welch had been a senior auditor for the state before retirement. He now did private consulting, discreetly, and only for people he trusted. Rita wouldn't have texted him if she didn't see real red flags. Elaine trusted Rita's instincts. They were blunt, not dramatic. She refreshed the banking dashboard. A series of transfers popped up under reimbursements, itemized vaguely as miscellaneous travel and staff bonuses. Dates spanned from April to December, $18,912, not linked to any employee on record, no names, no receipts. Elaine opened a spreadsheet and began typing possible undocumented transfers, suspicious, Maven Blue, unverified vendor, Q2, Q4 discrepancies, bonuses equals $18,912. Audit probability, high. Cheryl passed behind her, holding a fresh, sticky note scribbled with another name, Holtzman Creative, LLC. She'd found it buried under the web branding category. Another shell? Elaine took it without a word. On the living room TV, muted but visible, Callie's face beamed across a perfectly lit Instagram live replay. We believe in building generational wealth from the inside out. No excuses, no distractions, just alignment with our purpose. Her voice was syrupy, her face filtered. A faux fiddle leaf fig plant swayed in the corner of the frame like it had grown roots in pretend soil. Elaine stared at the screen for a long moment, then clicked the tab closed. That afternoon, Max dropped by unannounced. He didn't say much, just plopped into the armchair with a Coke and his hoodie pulled halfway over his face. Elaine handed him a napkin and a slice of banana bread. The room was warm, the air thick with something unspoken. He took a bite and mumbled through it. Mom said you've been looking through old stuff. Elaine stayed seated at the desk. Just organizing. Max nodded, chewing slowly, then quieter. She's been kinda stressed. Elaine paused. Then, I used to buy your dad socks every Christmas. Just plain cotton ones, white with the gray heel. He used to say thank you. He'd wear them around the house with holes in the heel until I got him new ones. Max blinked, unsure whether that was a story or a signal. Are you okay, Grandma? Elaine finally turned to face him. Her expression was calm, measured, but there was something glinting underneath. Not grief, not rage. Clarity. Better than they are, she said. Max studied her, then nodded once. He didn't ask more. Teenagers don't press the people who keep their secrets. After he left, Elaine opened her drawer and pulled out an old leather-bound planner. The year on it, 2017, the year she gave Jordan the check. She flipped to the page with the memo line, Initial Seed Investment, JR Concepts, 10%. Tucked behind it was a business card. Thomas Welch, CPA, Audit Consulting, retired. The corner still had a faint coffee stain. Elaine picked up her phone again. Text to Rita. Tell Tom I'll send him a file folder tonight. The next morning, Elaine carried her coffee with both hands, not because it was too hot, but because her joints needed the steadying. She walked past the blooming agave outside her window and paused briefly to watch a quail and its chicks cut across the gravel path. The stillness of the Arizona morning had always brought her peace, but not today. Today, the quiet felt performative, like it was trying to distract her from something that had already snapped loose. Back inside, she opened the investment folder again and laid it across her kitchen table like a sacred document. 7 pages, double-sided, slightly curled at the edges. The ink had held up well. Her name appeared on the first page, Elaine M. Roper. Silent stakeholder, 10% ownership. Her signature was next to Jordan's, followed by the notary's stamp and date. Her check stub, $75,000 even, was stapled to the back. The edges were yellowed slightly, but the font was bold and intact. Jordan had called it bridge funding back then. "Just a little gap until we close Series A," he'd said. He was wearing a blazer one size too big, hair gelled like he was going on Shark Tank. He'd promised her quarterly updates, optional participation, and a seat on the board if things scaled. She had never once received a dividend. Not a call, not a vote, not even a line in a holiday newsletter. Yet here it was, in writing. Undeniable. Elaine adjusted her glasses, booted up her laptop, and searched Callie's blog again. It had become her reluctant habit, like watching a child lie to your face while looking you directly in the eye. A new post had gone up overnight. "Everything we've built, from day one, has been self-made. No investors, no help, just us and the dream. When you build from nothing, you owe no one anything." Elaine stared at the word nothing for a long time. It hovered like a dare. Without comment, she saved the blog post as a PDF, timestamped it, and placed it in a folder titled Public Claims versus Legal Records. By mid-morning, Rita called. Her voice, always clear and clipped like the ring of a gavel, didn't waste time on greetings. "I reviewed the original paperwork you sent. Jordan never filed a shareholder cash-out. The state still lists you as an active silent stakeholder." Elaine took a slow sip of her coffee. "So he forgot to remove me." "He didn't forget. He just assumed you wouldn't check." There was a long pause. On the other end of the line, Elaine could hear Rita typing. "If you wanted to reactivate your rights," Rita continued, "we'd need to notify the board, not you directly. I can file it through my office. They'll have to respond." "File it," Elaine said without hesitation. "Use your name as proxy. That'll get their attention." "That's the point." Rita chuckled, not warmly, but with recognition. "I'll draft the motion. You'll get the timestamp by EOD." By 3 o'clock, Elaine's inbox pinged with a calendar invitation. JR Concepts Board Session, Thursday 10 a.m., Zoom. Topic: Stakeholder Inquiry. The invite came from an address she didn't recognize, likely Jordan's new assistant, young and unaware that she'd just handed the fox the keys to the hen house. At 4:17 p.m., Elaine's phone buzzed. A text from Jordan. "Why are you asking about the business all of a sudden? Something I should know?" She let the message sit, not out of spite but calculation. Then, with the same steadiness she'd once used to prepare balance sheets by hand, she typed, "Just reviewing my portfolio, like real CEOs do." She put the phone down, stood up from her chair, and went to the window. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long golden stripes across her lawn. The air outside shimmered slightly in the heat, and somewhere down the block a sprinkler hissed into life. Elaine didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vengeful. She felt centered. Her name had been left out of the story they were telling, but not out of the ledger. She returned to her desk, placed the original documents in a fireproof folder, and slid them into her lockbox. Elaine arrived at her office earlier than usual that morning, not because anything urgent was pending, but because she wanted the quiet. The kind of quiet that lives in fluorescent lights before they fully warm up, and in the low hum of a printer spooling before it starts to work. She unlocked the bottom drawer of her desk, retrieved a black pen, and placed it gently beside a 2-page legal document that Rita had emailed over at dawn. At the top of the first page, "Motion to remove Jordan Roper, primary signatory/operational authority, JR Concepts, LLC." Her name appeared just below Rita's as co-filer, along with her ownership stake, still intact, still enforceable. Legally, the board was required to acknowledge the motion. Practically, they weren't prepared for it. Elaine adjusted her glasses and read every word, twice, not because she doubted it, but because she respected it. Then she picked up the pen and signed with the same crisp, unshaken handwriting she'd used her entire life. It was not a revenge signature. It was a reconciliation signature between who she'd become and what she'd let slide. Once filed, the motion was immediately binding pending response. Rita had already CC'd the firm's registered agent, compliance counsel, and a quiet contact in the Arizona Department of Financial Institutions. Elaine clicked send on her copy. The cursor spun briefly, then stilled. Done. A minute later, Cheryl appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee, one for her, one for Elaine. She didn't need to ask how things had gone. She just raised her cup and said, "File sent to the compliance unit. Clean and sealed." Elaine took her cup, still warm. "Thank you." "Didn't do it for you," Cheryl said. "Did it for dignity." They sat side by side for a few minutes, the only sound being the soft tick of the wall clock and the occasional scuff of Cheryl's orthopedic soles against the floor. Then, a notification pinged on Elaine's laptop. Live Callie Roper, Let's Talk Financial Freedom, Q&A, now streaming. Without a word, she clicked it open. On screen, Callie's face filled the frame in soft lighting, hair styled into an effortless wave, teeth bright and symmetrical. Behind her sat a curated backdrop, fake succulents, designer books, a neon sign that read Boss Energy. "I just want to say," Callie began, all teeth and conviction, "financial freedom is something you build, not inherit. We've never relied on handouts. Every piece of our business was built brick by brick, moment by moment, fueled by grit and belief." Elaine took a long sip of her coffee and let the words slide past her like bad weather. Cheryl, standing behind her, crossed her arms and muttered, "That woman wouldn't know a ledger from a latte." Callie continued, "Remember, your net worth begins with self-worth. You don't owe anyone your success story." Elaine's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something colder. Precision. She closed the window mid-sentence and turned back to her inbox, where a reply from Rita had just come through. Subject: confirmed. Body: the motion was logged with timestamp. Jordan no longer has sole authority over account access, fund disbursement, or vendor contracts. We've locked down bank access until board review. Tom has eyes on everything from compliance. Elaine read the message once, then again. Then she leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a rare smile. Small, private, earned. At 1:04 p.m., her phone vibrated again. This time it was Jordan. Email. Subject: Mom. Body: what the hell are you doing? Why is Rita involved? You filed a motion? Are you seriously going after your own son? Elaine didn't respond. She didn't need to. She let the message linger, unsent, unopened, unanswered. The weight of his panic was enough. She printed the email, hole-punched it, and added it to her growing binder. The call came in just after breakfast, while Elaine was rinsing a peach under the kitchen faucet. The Arizona sun hadn't yet reached its highest point, but the light had already turned sharp and golden, cutting across her countertop like a blade. She dried her hands calmly, let the phone buzz 3 times, and answered with a practiced stillness. "Elaine Roper," she said. A clipped voice on the other end, professional, rattled. "Ms. Roper, this is Charlotte Simmons from First State Business Credit. We're contacting you as a courtesy, since you are now listed as a voting stakeholder on JR Concepts' operational file. There's been a freeze placed on the company's corporate credit card due to irregular activity flagged under internal audit." Elaine said nothing at first. She allowed the silence to stretch, just enough for the caller to fill it. "We're talking about multiple international vendor payments, inconsistent expense justifications, and some reimbursement requests that don't match the submitted receipts. Our legal review is ongoing, but the account is now suspended pending resolution." "Noted," Elaine said simply. "Please forward all documentation to Rita Solis at Solis Financial. She's acting as my proxy in all board matters." "Will do." Elaine ended the call, set the peach aside, and returned to her desk without a flicker of surprise. She pulled out her running ledger and jotted down the time of the call, the institution, and a note in the margin: credit freeze confirmed. Review receipts for Maui trip plus Blue Strategy. As if on cue, the front door creaked open. Cheryl stepped in, cheeks flushed, sandals dusty from a morning walk. "Well?" she asked, eyebrows raised. Elaine handed her the phone. "Credits cut." Cheryl let out a low whistle. "That was fast. Guess it doesn't take much when the paper trail is this obvious. Truth doesn't need time, just oxygen." Cheryl reached into her tote and pulled out a manila envelope. Complaint's been filed. IRS tip line, small business division, misuse of tax-exempt expenditures, improperly classified vendor payments. I even cited Callie's blog post about deducting their branding retreat in Sedona. Elaine chuckled once, dry and short. She really did them no favors. Outside, a lawn crew's blower hummed faintly, scattering dust across the cul-de-sac like echoes of a life that had always looked tidy from the curb. Back inside, Elaine's phone vibrated again. This time, it was a link, sent anonymously. Instagram @CallieCreates, story unavailable. She clicked anyway. The page had gone dark. No reels, no daily affirmations, no curated product placements or faux casual captions about manifesting equity. Just a blank profile photo and a single post. Taking time to realign offline, appreciate the grace. Cheryl saw it over her shoulder. Translation: the brand deals are calling lawyers. Elaine closed the tab and sat back. There were no parades in this kind of war, no trophies, just confirmations. One by one. Later that day, Max arrived unannounced again, this time holding a comic book and a half-drunk energy drink. He didn't sit right away, just stood in the doorway of her study, watching her quietly sort a pile of printed statements into labeled binders. "Mom's quiet today," he said, not quite looking at her. "Dad's been on the phone all morning." Elaine kept organizing. Sometimes silence is volume. Max stepped further in. "Did you do something?" Elaine stopped then. Looked up slowly. Her eyes, behind her glasses, were calm but firm, the same way they'd looked when she taught him how to balance a savings sheet in middle school. She rose, walked over, and hugged him. A full, firm hug. Not grandmotherly, but grounding. "I did the books, sweetie," she said softly, against his shoulder. Nothing more. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. As he left a few minutes later, gently closing the door behind him, Elaine returned to her desk. A new message had arrived. From Rita Solis. Subject: cash flow. Body: they're bleeding, quietly but badly. No runway left by end of month. You want to pull the cord? Elaine didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out the same calculator she'd used the day she signed the original investment. She turned it over in her hand, feeling the slight chip on the left side. The memory of Jordan, age 11, learning decimals beside her, came and went like a passing scent. The next morning, the desert light came in softer than usual, filtered by low clouds that threatened rain but delivered only shadow. Elaine stood at the kitchen counter in her robe, stirring a cup of instant oatmeal, her eyes fixed not on the food but on the manila folder lying open beside her. It was the kind of morning that didn't rush, and neither did she. Inside the folder were 3 documents: a breakdown of loan balances linked to JR Concepts, 2 flagged credit cards with Jordan as the personal guarantor, and a signed disbursement agreement that proved he'd borrowed against Elaine's original seed investment to secure private financing. The arrogance was there in plain print. He'd gambled borrowed money on the illusion of ownership without ever owning anything outright. Elaine clipped the pages neatly together and scanned them into a PDF. She didn't need to dress up the facts. They dressed themselves. By 9:17 a.m., the file had been forwarded to their business bank with a short, clinical note. As a named investor and silent stakeholder, I am requesting a legal lien be placed on assets currently associated with the JR Concepts line of credit due to misrepresentation of ownership equity and misuse of pledged capital. Supporting documents attached. Please confirm receipt. By 10:30, Rita had filed a formal withdrawal request on Elaine's behalf. Full extraction of the original $75,000 principal, plus accrued interest calculated at 5.2% over 7 years, and even $103,860.24. They were no longer playing the long game. They were collecting. The lien was processed by noon. Elaine was placing new labels on her financial archive shelf when the doorbell rang. She froze, just for a moment, not in fear, but in recognition. Some footsteps are too familiar to mishear. When she opened the door, Jordan stood on her porch, sweat dampening his collar despite the overcast sky. He wasn't dressed for business. No blazer, no affectation, just panic, poorly disguised by volume. "You put a lien on the company?" he barked. "Are you insane?" Elaine didn't move from the threshold. "No," she said. "I'm meticulous." "You're ruining us." She tilted her head slightly, as if considering the claim. "No, Jordan. You did that. I'm just not underwriting it anymore." His eyes darted past her, as if expecting someone to step in. "You have no idea what you've triggered. Callie's sponsors are walking. Payroll's in jeopardy. We've got vendors calling legal." "I know," Elaine said calmly. "I read the balance sheets." "You have no right." "I have exactly 10% right." Jordan's mouth opened like he had something else to say, something rehearsed, but the script had vanished. There was no speech, no spin, no boardroom confidence, just a man cornered by his own ledger. "You used me," Elaine said, her voice low. "Not just my money, my silence. You assumed I'd stay quiet because I always had." Jordan took a step forward, but she blocked the frame with her body. "I would suggest," she added, "you leave before you say something you'll later regret in court records." He stared at her, unblinking, unmoored, and for a flicker of a second, she saw it. Not anger, but fear. Not of her, but of collapse. Then he turned and walked back to his car without another word. The tires kicked up gravel as he pulled away too fast, like momentum might substitute for dignity. Back inside, Elaine sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. There was already a message from Rita waiting. Subject: lien confirmed. Body: notice delivered. Funds frozen. I'd say it's time to change the locks. Digitally. Elaine replied with a single line. "Cheryl's on it." An hour later, Cheryl texted from her home office across town. "New passwords generated, old access revoked. He'll figure it out when he tries to log into payroll." Elaine picked up her mug and took a slow sip. She wasn't smiling. Not yet. By the end of the week, Chandler's heat had settled back into its usual August weight, thick in the air, sticking to window glass and front porches like dust with intent. Elaine worked with the blinds half drawn and a cool washcloth on her neck. She wasn't hiding from the sun. She was watching what it exposed. Her laptop pinged with a fresh alert. Rita had forwarded an industry tip sheet. Subject: Callie Roper attempting to offload private label assets. Elaine clicked the link and skimmed the details. A broker in Phoenix had listed Callie's boutique skincare line for strategic acquisition at a steep markdown. No press release, no fanfare, just a backdoor listing with motivated seller tags on every product. Callie was bleeding out the illusion of independence. Elaine picked up her phone, dialed Rita directly. "She's trying to dump assets," Elaine said, no preamble. "Are we exposed?" Some of her trademark filings list JR Concepts as the parent LLC. She either forgot to spin them out or didn't think anyone would check. "But I filed an IP challenge this morning. Those assets are locked until resolution. No sale, no pivot." Elaine's voice dropped. "So if they try to drive off, the engine doesn't come with them." Rita laughed, dry as gin. "Exactly." "Leave him the car," Elaine said. "Take the engine." They hung up without further commentary. There was nothing left to say. Not today. At lunchtime, Elaine pulled out a container of cold potato salad and sat on the back patio. The neighborhood kids were splashing in a nearby pool, but the sound barely touched her. Instead, she scrolled through her phone to see what Callie might have done to explain her disappearing act. But there was no post, no caption, no curated grief. The Instagram profile now held just two things, a black square and a stripped bio that read simply, "Offline for a season. Working on something real." Elaine raised an eyebrow. Finally. A few moments later, her notifications pinged again, this time from Max. He'd posted something. It wasn't a photo, just text over a muted green background. Some things should have stayed grateful. Elaine stared at it for a moment, then tapped the screen to zoom in. It didn't have the polish of Callie's design-heavy posts. It didn't beg for likes. It just sat there, true and unresolved. She didn't reply. She wouldn't insert herself into whatever that meant, but she did screenshot it and tuck it into a folder named Max, Observations. By late afternoon, Cheryl arrived with a flash drive and 2 grocery bags. one filled with tabbouleh and hummus, the other with confidential federal forms. "I found something," she said, setting the drive down with the same gravity as someone placing a smoking gun on the table. Elaine looked up from her file binder. "Found what?" "Paycheck protection filings. 2 of them. Same quarter. Overlapping employee counts. They claimed full-time staff that never existed. And get this, one of the filings listed your address, the firm's address." Elaine blinked once, slowly. "They used my home office?" "Technically, yes. I matched it with IRS archives. They listed your square footage for a satellite bookkeeping extension under JR Concepts, claiming you as an outsourced resource partner. You were part of their justification for the second loan." Elaine sat back in her chair. "So I'm not just an investor, I'm part of the fraud?" "Unwittingly, but yes." She reached for her legal pad, flipped to a fresh page, and began outlining a new timeline, this time with red pen. "This isn't an audit anymore," she said quietly. "This is evidence." Cheryl gave a half smile. "We always said we'd die with spreadsheets in our hands. Just didn't think they'd be this fun." Elaine didn't smile back. She was too focused, too present. Her jaw set tighter with every bullet point she added to the list. She pulled out a folder marked IRS backdoor filings and inserted the flash drive inside. The formal asset freeze hit on a Monday morning, just as the valley light began bouncing off every windshield in Elaine's neighborhood. A softness still hung in the air, that brief grace before the Arizona sun turned aggressive. Elaine opened her email and saw it waiting. A subject line as cold as it was definitive. Subject: Notice of Financial Audit. JR Concepts, LLC. Assets frozen. Effective immediately. She didn't click right away. She didn't need to. She knew what was inside. She'd built the scaffolding for it. A second message arrived seconds later from Rita. Subject: Motion confirmed. Audit team engaged. Body: Bank cooperation secured. Full freeze in effect. Payroll halted. Vendor payments blocked. You did it, E. Elaine closed her eyes, breathed in once through her nose, and let the air settle before she moved. It was done. Across town, the effects were immediate. Callie's social media vanished, this time not in a dramatic digital detox, but in something quieter, more desperate. Her YouTube channel returned a 404 error. Her press kit was pulled from affiliate servers. Her brand partnerships, all of them, removed her name from landing pages within 48 hours. It was as if her online life had been wiped with a cloth soaked in bleach. Elaine didn't celebrate. She just updated the ledger. Later that afternoon, she met Rita at a quiet cafe off Elliott Road, the kind of place that still laminated their menus and played instrumental covers of Coldplay songs. Rita slid a small folder across the table without flourish. "All signatures accounted for. Full extraction is possible. You'll walk with everything legally yours." Elaine scanned the pages, pen uncapped. "I want out," she said, "all of it. Clean exit. No percentages, no clauses, just closure." "You sure?" Rita asked. "That 10% is still real estate. If they recover—" "I don't want pieces of a shell," Elaine interrupted. "I want nothing left that can be manipulated." Rita nodded, already pulling out the final authorization. "This page lets you sign off." Elaine signed. "Done," Rita said and leaned back. "Now you've got clean books." Cheryl joined them halfway through the coffee refills. She didn't sit, just placed a folder down like she was laying flowers on a grave. "And a clean record," she added. "Which you still have, by the way. IRS flagged your address, but we scrubbed your name off the filing. You're clear." Elaine gave her a long look, one that carried more than thanks. It carried recognition. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for this. For believing me when I wasn't saying anything." "That's what friends are for," Cheryl said, her voice rougher than usual. "And numbers." Elaine updated her living trust the next morning. The air in her home felt different now. Less weighted, less like the walls were listening. Her lawyer, a quiet man with round glasses and the soft demeanor of a librarian, asked no questions as she changed the beneficiary structure. Max would get a dedicated education fund, irrevocable, disconnected from his parents, protected. The rest? designated for community development, local nonprofits, literacy grants, scholarships for kids who didn't have an Elaine in their corner. That evening, Max showed up just after sundown. He didn't knock. He'd learned by now he didn't have to. Elaine was in the kitchen, slicing plums and boiling water for tea. He stood in the doorway, hands in his hoodie pocket. "I saw what happened," he said. "Dad's been yelling at the walls. Mom's not talking. It's like everything just cracked." Elaine turned slowly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Max's voice dropped to a whisper. "Did you do this to hurt them?" She looked at him for a long time, the way you look at someone not to assess, but to prepare them for something they may not be ready to carry. "No," she said finally. "I did it to end the pretending, for all of us." Max didn't reply. Not right away. But after a moment he nodded once, the kind of nod that belongs to someone who knows there's more to understand and will take the time to understand it. Elaine stepped forward and touched his shoulder gently. "Your parents told a story. I just added footnotes." The envelope arrived on a Thursday, tucked neatly between a grocery circular and an oil change coupon, the kind of ordinary placement that belied its weight. Elaine stood at the mailbox longer than usual. The sun had already passed its punishing peak, but the metal still radiated heat against her palms. She didn't rush. Instead, she walked slowly back to the house, the envelope clutched in one hand, unopened. Inside, she placed it gently on her kitchen table, made herself a cup of Earl Grey, and waited until the tea steeped to the exact color she liked, the tone of burnished oak. Then, and only then, did she open it. Internal Revenue Service, Taxpayer Inquiry Review Division. Subject, Status Update, Case number 8024-JR. Her eyes scanned the letter once, twice, then a third time, more slowly. She folded it neatly and set it aside. No findings, no penalties, no liability. Her records had been reviewed and cleared. She wasn't even required to testify. Cheryl had been right. Her ledger was clean. She reached for the letter again, flattened it, and tucked it into a folder labeled Personal. Final Confirmations. Then, in a completely separate folder, unmarked, kept beneath the floorboard in her study, she filed a different letter. One she'd printed days earlier but hadn't sealed. To whom it may concern, Jordan Roper is hereby in breach of multiple fiduciary agreements, investor disclosures, and federal small business loan conditions. But she wouldn't need to send it now. That burden had already shifted hands, to the agencies now involved, to the accountants reviewing his amended returns. Later that afternoon, while rearranging her budget files, she paused beside the small community grant binder she kept tucked beneath the corner shelf. It wasn't part of her official records, just something she'd maintained over the years, ideas, earmarks, models for rotating scholarships. She pulled it out and opened a new page. Donor name, Elaine M. Roper. Amount, $10,000. Purpose, Chandler MicroStart Grant, Community Business Recovery, designated in honor of Jordan A. Roper. Cheryl called it petty, Elaine called it poetry. That weekend she submitted the grant. Quietly, anonymously, at least in practice. The administrator at Chandler MicroStart had no idea the name listed in the "in honor of" field was the same man under investigation. But Elaine didn't need them to know. She only needed the ledger to reflect what the holidays never had, that even after everything, she could give without permission and without a bow. Max dropped by 2 days later with a stack of library books and a tired look around the eyes. He didn't mention his parents. He rarely did anymore. Instead, he sat down on the couch and pulled his feet under him like he used to when he was a child. Elaine handed him a bowl of fresh grapes and waited. Eventually, he broke the silence. "They'll never understand what you did," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even tinged with judgment. Just fact. Elaine looked over at him, really looked, and saw in his face a softness that hadn't existed months ago. Something quieter. Something freer. "It wasn't for them to understand," she said. "It was for the record." He nodded once, then again. This time, slower. As if he finally understood what she meant by record. That night, Cheryl showed up unannounced with a paper bag and a grin that only widened when Elaine gave her a look. "I got you something," she said, setting the bag on the table and pulling out a ceramic mug wrapped in brown tissue paper. Elaine unwrapped it carefully, laughing as she read the words printed in bold script. "Auditors do it better." "It was either that or Spreadsheet Queen," Cheryl said, but this one had more teeth. Elaine placed the mug down, perfectly aligned with the edge of her desk. She didn't smile wide, she never did, but the corners of her mouth curled, just enough. She made tea in it that very evening. The envelope was cream-colored and heavier than necessary, with Jordan's handwriting scrawled across the front in that hurried, looping script he'd always used. Like if he wrote fast enough, the truth wouldn't catch him. Elaine found it tucked into her storm door on a windless morning, propped like an apology someone didn't have the nerve to deliver in person. She held it for a moment longer than she meant to, staring not at the name, but at the crease in the corner where it had been folded once, then unfolded, then folded again. Back inside, she didn't sit at her desk. She didn't pour tea. She didn't even take off her cardigan. She just stood by the window and opened the letter. "Mom, I'm not asking you to undo everything. I know you won't. I know you think I deserve all of this. Maybe I do. But this is bigger than me now. Payroll is gone. The brand is gone. Callie's barely holding it together and Max won't even look at me. You've made your point, but I have a family, and you're still part of it whether you like it or not. I'm asking you, not as an investor, not even as a mother, but as someone who remembers what it's like to want to protect their child from shame. Please, make it stop. Jordan." Elaine read it through once, then a second time more slowly. He had not said sorry, not once, not for the money, not for the lies, not for the empty holidays, the 6 years of silence wrapped in glitter and digital minimalism. She folded the letter cleanly along its original crease, ran her thumb once across the edge to smooth it, and walked it back to her filing cabinet. She opened the drawer marked JRC, Closed Matters, slid the letter in, and shut it without hesitation. Some documents didn't require a response. Only storage. Around noon, a sharp buzz came from the security intercom outside her gate. Elaine didn't flinch. She simply tapped the feed button and watched. Callie stood there, alone, dressed down, her usual gloss muted beneath a pair of oversized sunglasses and a linen jacket too big for her frame. She didn't look camera-ready. She looked like someone who had stopped planning for what came next. Elaine didn't open the gate. She didn't press the speaker, not at first. Callie stepped closer, brushing the hair out of her face. "Elaine," she said to the camera, voice small but tight, "we don't need to do this. You've made your point. You've hurt everyone. Is that what you wanted?" Elaine tapped the mic. "The audit," she said calmly, "isn't mine anymore." She released the mic and turned off the feed. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Rita. Subject, final. Body, JR. Concepts is formally dissolved. All state and federal filings processed. No outstanding liabilities under your name. Clean books. Just you and me now. Elaine stared at the message for a moment, letting the finality of it bloom quietly in her chest. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt something better. Unburdened. She walked to the dining room, where her original ledger still sat beneath a stack of audit notes. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Instead, she pulled out the mug Cheryl had given her, filled it with hot water and chamomile, and walked out to the back patio where the wind was soft and forgettable. She sat down and looked out across the yard, the dry river stones she'd arranged in a careful arc glowing in the late afternoon sun. No footprints. No trespasses. Just space. The knock at the door came just before dusk, gentle and unhurried, like someone knocking on purpose, not out of urgency. Elaine opened it to find Max standing there in a plain t-shirt and jeans, no hoodie this time, no headphones looped around his neck. He looked taller than she remembered, not physically, but in how he stood, straight, more grounded. "I brought my laptop," he said. "And that budgeting sheet you gave me. I think I messed it up." Elaine smiled, not wide, but deep. "Then let's fix it," she said, stepping aside. He followed her into the study where the evening light poured over the wooden desk like melted bronze. Everything was in order, binders closed, files aligned, plants watered. But one object sat out, as if waiting. The old ledger. Its leather cover was worn to softness, the corners slightly bent from years of use. Elaine had cleaned it the day before, not because it needed it, but because it deserved to be handled with respect. She gestured to the seat beside her. Max dropped his backpack on the floor and sat, his palms flat on the table like he didn't want to leave fingerprints. Elaine opened the book slowly, revealing page after page of handwritten entries, each in her crisp mathematical penmanship. Notations of every kind, grocery tallies from the 90s, a loan she once co-signed for her sister, the first $75,000 investment to Jordan with its projected ROI annotated in red. "This," she said, tapping gently on a yellowed page, "is what real accountability looks like." Max leaned in, eyes scanning the columns. "You use this for everything?" "I still do," Elaine said. "I trust paper more than promises." He nodded. "It's cleaner than I expected." Elaine smiled again. "That's the point." She flipped to a fresh page, pulled a blank deposit slip from a drawer, and placed it next to the ledger. "Open it." Max looked at her, confused. She nodded toward the slip. "Your name's on it. Routing number and account set up last week. A starter investment. Yours. Not tied to them. Not conditional. Not symbolic. Real." Max stared down at the slip. His name, in clean black print, sat at the top. He ran his finger over it like it might fade. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "You don't have to say anything," Elaine replied. "But you do have to learn how to protect it." From the other side of the desk, she slid over a short balance sheet. Simple, structured, color-coded. "I want you to build this line by line. Not as a test. As practice. This is how you account for what's yours." He studied the sheet carefully, brow furrowing in focus. Elaine stood, walked to the small file cabinet in the corner, and pulled out a thin manila folder. Inside was a printed offer, unsigned but waiting. She handed it to him. "Rita wants to bring you in. Internship. Just 2 afternoons a week to start. Entry-level work, but real clients. She says you've got the brain for this." Max blinked. "She said that?" "She doesn't flatter," Elaine said, "which is why it means something." He looked back down at the sheet, then the ledger, then the account slip again. A silence hung between them, not heavy, not awkward, just full. "I think," he said finally, "I think I finally get it." Elaine didn't answer. She just turned the next page of the ledger and held out the pen. Max took it. The notary arrived at 10:05 a.m. wearing a navy suit and a kind smile. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Elaine had already prepared everything, each signature tab aligned, every clause reread twice the night before. They sat at her dining table, the light filtering through the gauzy curtains in strips that fell neatly across the signature lines. She signed with a pen older than Max, smooth, weighted, honest. At the bottom of the last page, termination of financial rights, Jordan Roper, all holdings, licenses, residual claims, void. The notary double-checked the stamps, nodded, and stood. Elaine walked him out with a brief thank you. As she closed the door behind him, she stood for a moment in the entryway, hand resting on the frame, breathing in the quiet like it was something she could finally afford. In her study, her laptop chimed with the confirmation Rita had promised. The trust was updated, fully executed. It no longer resembled the one Elaine had written nearly a decade ago. 90% of her estate was now divided between Chandler MicroStart, a local literacy nonprofit, and Max's Irrevocable Education Fund. 10%, unassigned, discretionary, marked only as emergent community response. That was the word she'd added with intention. Not emergency, not charity. Emergent, for when the next person needed a way out before the damage was irreversible. Rita had highlighted the change in her signature blue ink and added a post-it that simply read, "Nothing left to contest. You built it that way." Elaine responded by phone. She didn't ask for a recap. She didn't need assurance. She just said, "Leave nothing behind they can mismanage." You already didn't, Rita replied. Now it's just math. By late afternoon, the house had settled into its usual hush. No deliveries, no buzzing intercoms, no more certified letters left at the threshold. The silence wasn't empty now. It was earned. Her phone rang once more around 5:40 p.m. Unknown number, but the area code was local. Voicemail. Elaine listened on speaker while sorting receipts into the archive box she kept in the hall closet. Voicemail transcript. Ms. Roper, this is Alan Chan, representing Jordan Roper regarding remaining claims to dissolved holdings under JR Concepts. We're requesting a conversation regarding residual interest, possibly a mediation opportunity. Please call at your earliest convenience. She deleted it without a second thought. From the doorway, Cheryl leaned in, holding 2 iced teas and a smirk that barely passed as polite. That him again? Elaine nodded. Cheryl placed 1 glass beside her. You gave him 6 years, he gave you none. Keep deleting. Elaine didn't reply. She just sipped the tea and turned back to her spreadsheet. That night, she logged into her online banking for the first time in days, not because she was nervous, because she was finally ready. Her account had stabilized. No odd movement, no flags, no withdrawals she didn't authorize. Clean, level, unbothered. She refreshed once, just to see it hold steady. And it did. Max texted her not long after. Max, finished my balance sheet. You were right, the numbers don't lie. She replied with a single period. He'd know what it meant. The new Chandler MicroStart office sat just off the corner of 4th and McQueen, tucked behind a coffee shop and a strip mall gym that always smelled faintly of rubber and ambition. It didn't look like much from the outside, stucco beige, low-slung roof, but Elaine knew what waited inside. She'd helped sketch the blueprint. The automatic doors gave a gentle whoosh as she stepped through, the cool air brushing across her cheeks. To her left was a welcome counter staffed by a woman no older than 30, earbuds coiled neatly at her collar. She greeted Elaine with a smile. Ms. Roper? Elaine nodded, adjusting the strap of her leather tote. Just here to walk the floors. Of course, we've been expecting you. The front foyer opened into a sunlit workspace lined with modular desks and corkboard walls pinned with job listings, business licenses, and local grant flyers. At the far end, just beside the resource library, was a glass partition etched with 5 names: Elaine M. Roper, founding sponsor. Etched clean, centered, permanent. She stood in front of it for a moment, not smiling, not tearful, just present. That was enough. In Classroom B, a small group of women gathered around a U-shaped table setup. Each had a binder, a pencil, and that quiet hunger for dignity that often follows loss. Divorce, displacement, dead-end jobs that didn't leave enough for groceries. Elaine placed her materials on the instructor's desk and began as she always did, without small talk, without slides. We're not here to chase money, she said, her voice clear and steady. We're here to understand it. Because what you understand, you don't fear. And what you don't fear, you don't lose so easily. There were murmurs of recognition, heads nodding. Some scribbled, others just watched. All of them listened. Halfway through the session, the side door opened quietly. Max stepped in, carrying an extra box of calculators and laminated budgeting guides. He looked around once, caught his grandmother's eye, and smiled with an ease that hadn't existed just a year earlier. Set those on the second table, she said with a nod. When the session ended, 2 women stayed back to ask about side hustles and income mapping. Elaine answered every question with the same meticulous grace she used to build her own life back, slow, precise, and without apology. Later, in the staff break room, she poured 2 cups of cheap office coffee into mismatched mugs and handed one to Max. He was perched on the counter, sleeves rolled to his elbows, flipping through a spreadsheet mock-up from one of the women who'd stayed behind. She's actually good, he said. Like, she already thinks in categories. She just needed confirmation, Elaine replied, sipping her coffee. Sometimes that's all people are missing. Max paused, then looked over at her, brow furrowed slightly. Do you ever wish it had gone differently? Elaine didn't hesitate. No. He nodded, but she could see the unasked part in his eyes, the part that still wondered what might come next. She placed her mug down and turned to him. "Don't carry resentment," she said gently. "Just receipts." Max laughed. A real one this time, not cynical, not guarded. "You should put that on a mug." "Already did," she replied, deadpan. They packed up quietly after that. The afternoon heat had thickened into something dry and stubborn, but inside, everything felt light, balanced. Until her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Unknown number. Voicemail left. No transcription available. Elaine played it on speaker. "Elaine, it's Callie. I know you won't pick up. You probably think I don't get it or that I never will, but you broke everything. Everything I built, everything we built. You didn't fix anything. You just watched it fall." No apology, no acknowledgement, just a final sentence heavy with hurt. Elaine didn't press delete. She saved it and walked outside into the heat, the sun high now. Her shadow stretched long but solid behind her. The garden had taken years to settle into itself, not flourish. Elaine wasn't interested in anything showy, but settle. Stones placed with intention, desert lavender lining the fence, a single mesquite tree leaning gently to the east, casting enough shade for 2 chairs and a side table. Elaine sat in one of those chairs now, a tall glass of iced tea sweating beside her elbow, her legs stretched comfortably in linen slacks. Rita sat across from her, shoes off, ankles crossed. Cheryl took the middle seat between them, eating a lemon bar she'd brought in wax paper from the bakery near her place. They didn't talk much. Not anymore. The space didn't need to be filled. Elaine held a folded letter in her lap. Real paper, handwritten in blue ink. She'd received it 2 days earlier in a stamped envelope with a Chandler return address. "Dear Ms. Roper, I used your grant to buy a used catering van. First bookings next month. A wedding. You don't know me, but I needed someone to believe I could start again. Now I believe it too. Thank you." Elaine folded the letter slowly, carefully. Then she passed it to Rita without a word. Rita read it, then handed it to Cheryl. "Proof," Cheryl said softly, her mouth full of lemon and truth, "that audits aren't just about the books." Elaine raised her glass. "To balance." They clinked tea and lemon water and diet cola, and for a moment, the sound was enough. That evening, Max knocked on the back door. He always did, even when invited. He held an envelope of his own, thinner, with a college crest printed in the top left corner. "I got in," he said. "Business program, honors track, and they're giving me some merit money." Elaine reached out, squeezed his shoulder, and said nothing. She didn't need to. His grin carried the rest. They sat at the dining table later that night, the overhead light soft and golden, as if even the house knew the moment mattered. Elaine stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled the old ledger, the original one, from its resting place. She placed it gently in front of Max. "With this," she said, "comes truth." He looked down at the book, his hands hesitant but steady. "Are you sure?" "I won't need it where I'm going," Elaine said, her voice even. "But you will. Not because life is fair, it's not, but because clarity doesn't ask permission." Max nodded. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. The way he ran his palm across the worn leather was thanks enough. That night, when the house was finally quiet, Elaine returned to her study. She opened her journal to the back, the last page, and wrote in her tidy script, "This year I was remembered. By myself." She capped the pen and looked around the room, the labeled binders, the sealed files, the new plant Cheryl had brought in a yellow ceramic pot. Everything had its place. Then she reached for the mug, the one with the bold black lettering that had become her signature more than any holiday card or title ever had. Auditors do it better. She set it gently on her desk, aligned perfectly with the corner. The lamp glowed beside it. Elaine sat down, looked out the window one last time, and let her thoughts settle like dust at the end of a long, dry season. She didn't feel victorious. She felt documented, and as she reached forward to close the final folder in the cabinet, she said, "To no one. To everyone. They gave me nothing. I gave them everything they asked for. In writing.